Desperate Apache woman left her baby at man's door. Days later she came back, but he took her too. The night was quiet in the Arizona desert, the kind of quiet that felt heavy and endless. The wind moved slowly across the dry land, brushing against old trees and empty roads. Daniel Carter sat alone in his small wooden house at the edge of town. He was a man in his early 40s, living a simple life far from noise and crowds. His days were calm, and his nights were usually silent. That night felt no different until everything changed. Daniel had lost his wife years ago. Since then, he had learned how to live with silence. He cooked simple meals, worked long hours repairing farm equipment, and spent evenings reading or staring out the window. He was not unhappy, just quiet. His house reflected that life. It was clean but plain, with old furniture and few decorations. The only light came from a single lamp near his chair. As Daniel stood up to turn off the light, he heard a sound that made him stop. A knock. It was soft, almost unsure. He frowned, listening closely. No one ever came to his house that late. The nearest neighbor lived far away, and the road was rarely used after dark. For a moment he wondered if he had imagined it. Then he heard it again. Daniel's heart beat faster. He walked slowly to the door, each step careful. He did not feel fear, only surprise. He opened the door and looked out into the darkness. The porch light revealed nothing at first, just empty space and the quiet desert night. Then he looked down. There, on the wooden floor of his porch, was a small bundle. It was wrapped in an old but carefully folded blanket. Daniel knelt slowly, confused. When the bundle moved and made a tiny sound, his breath caught. Inside the blanket was a baby. The baby was very small, likely only a few days old. Its face was red from the cold night air, but it was breathing calmly. Daniel froze, unsure what to do. His mind raced with questions. Who would leave a baby here? Why his house? Where was the mother? He looked around again, scanning the road and the darkness beyond the porch light. There was no sign of anyone. Whoever had left the baby was already gone. Daniel gently picked up the child. The baby was warm but trembling slightly. Without thinking, he brought the baby inside and closed the door. He placed the child on the couch and wrapped it in a thicker blanket. The baby opened its eyes briefly, then closed them again. Daniel stood there, staring. He had not held a baby in his life. He felt awkward, scared, and deeply moved all at once. He knew one thing for sure: this baby had been left by someone who cared. The blanket was clean and the child did not appear neglected. This was not abandonment, it was desperation. He checked the baby carefully, making sure it was safe and breathing well. The baby made soft sounds, small cries that felt louder in the quiet room. Daniel searched his kitchen and found some milk he used for himself. He hesitated, knowing it might not be right, but the baby calmed after a small feeding. As the night passed, Daniel did not sleep. He sat beside the couch, watching the baby rise and fall with each breath. His thoughts kept returning to the unknown woman who had left her child behind. What kind of pain must she have been in? What danger or fear had forced her to make such a choice? Morning light slowly entered the room. The desert sun rose, painting the walls in soft gold. Daniel felt tired but alert. The baby was still asleep, peaceful and quiet. In the daylight, Daniel noticed details he had missed before. The blanket was not just old, it was handmade. Small beads were sewn into one corner, forming a simple pattern. Daniel recognized it. He had seen similar work at local markets and community events. It was Apache beadwork. He sat back, thinking. Not far from his home was a small Apache community. He had worked with some of the people there over the years, fixing tools and machines. They were private but respectful, and Daniel had always admired their strength and traditions. This detail made the situation feel more real and more serious. As the day went on, Daniel contacted a local clinic for advice. He did not give many details, only that he had found a newborn and needed guidance. They told him how to keep the baby warm and fed and suggested contacting authorities. Daniel agreed, but something inside him urged caution. He wanted to be sure he understood the situation before making decisions that could not be undone. Throughout the day, neighbors began to talk. News travels fast in small towns. Some people came by to check, offering diapers, clothes, and advice. Others whispered questions Daniel could not answer. Everyone wanted to know where the baby came from. Daniel stayed quiet. He focused on caring for the child. Each time the baby opened its eyes or wrapped its tiny fingers around his hand, something changed inside him. He felt a sense of responsibility he had never known before. That night, after the visitors left, Daniel sat alone again. The baby slept nearby. Outside, the desert wind returned, carrying distant sounds. Daniel found himself thinking less about what he should do and more about who the mother was. He imagined her standing in the dark, holding her child one last time before knocking on his door. He imagined the fear, the tears she must have held back, the strength it took to walk away. No mother would do this unless she believed it was the only way. Daniel whispered quietly to the sleeping child, promising nothing bad would happen tonight. 2 days passed. No one came forward. Daniel kept noticing small signs, the careful wrapping, the clean clothes, the calm nature of the baby. Everything pointed to love, not neglect. On the third morning, Daniel sensed something different in the air. He could not explain it, but he felt watched. As dawn broke, he heard footsteps outside. Slow, unsure footsteps. Daniel opened the door. Standing there was a young woman. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were worn and her eyes were filled with fear and sadness. Her long dark hair was tied loosely and her hands shook slightly. She did not step forward. She just stood there, frozen. Daniel knew immediately. This was the mother. She looked past him, her eyes searching the room behind him. When she heard the soft sound of her baby inside, tears rolled down her face. She fell to her knees, covering her mouth, afraid to speak. Daniel did not say anything right away. He stepped aside and opened the door wider. The story that had begun with a knock in the night was far from over. Daniel stood quietly as the young woman knelt on his porch. He could see how weak she was, how every breath seemed heavy. Her shoulders shook as she tried to control her emotions. She did not look dangerous or careless. She looked broken, tired, and afraid. Daniel slowly stepped back, giving her space, and gently said she could come inside. His voice was calm, not demanding. The woman hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like she might run away. Then she heard her baby cry softly from inside the house. That sound pulled her forward. She stood up slowly and stepped inside, keeping her eyes low. The moment she saw her child lying safely on the couch, her legs almost gave out. Daniel moved closer, ready to support her if she fell. She went to the couch and carefully picked up the baby, holding the child close to her chest. She whispered soft words in her own language, words filled with love and relief. The baby settled immediately, as if recognizing her voice. Tears streamed down the woman's face, but this time they were mixed with relief. Daniel watched quietly. He could feel the bond between them. There was no doubt in his mind now. This baby belonged with this woman. Whatever her story was, it was not one of carelessness. It was one of pain. After a few minutes, Daniel gently offered her a glass of water. She took it with shaking hands and nodded in thanks. She sat down, still holding the baby, and finally spoke. Her voice was low and weak, but clear enough. She told him her name was Nailin. She said she was from the nearby Apache community. She explained that her life had fallen apart in a short time. Someone she trusted had left her alone when she needed help the most. She had no money, no safe place, and no one willing to protect her and her child. She had tried staying with relatives, but there was fear and pressure there too. She felt trapped. Nailin said she had walked for hours that night, holding her baby close, trying to decide what to do. She had seen Daniel before, working in town, always quiet, always kind. She remembered how he spoke respectfully to elders and never judged anyone. When she reached his house, she stood in the dark for a long time, crying silently. Leaving her baby was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she believed the baby would be safe there. Daniel listened without interrupting. He did not ask many questions. He did not look at her with blame. He simply listened. That alone seemed to surprise her. She was used to people speaking over her, telling her what she should have done, what she should feel. Daniel did none of that. As the day went on, Daniel helped her rest. He prepared simple food and showed her where she could wash up. Nailin was hesitant at first, unsure if she should accept help. But her body was exhausted, and she could not hide it. She rested on the couch while Daniel kept a respectful distance. Outside, rumors continued to spread. Some neighbors noticed the woman's arrival and began whispering again. Daniel heard a knock at the door later that afternoon. It was a local officer doing routine checks after hearing about the baby. Daniel spoke calmly and honestly. He explained that the mother had returned and that the baby was safe. The officer noted everything but did not act immediately. He said the situation would need careful handling. This made Nailin nervous. She feared losing her baby. Daniel noticed her anxiety and reassured her that nothing would happen suddenly. He told her that people would talk, but that did not mean they were against her. Still, fear stayed in her eyes. That night, Nailin stayed in the spare room. Daniel made sure she had privacy and comfort. He slept lightly, listening for any sound. He felt a responsibility not just for the baby but for the woman too. He knew the world could be harsh, especially to someone already struggling. The next few days passed slowly. Daniel learned more about Nailin's life through small conversations. She had once had dreams of raising her child peacefully, close to her culture and land. Those dreams had been damaged but not destroyed. She spoke carefully, choosing her words, still afraid of judgment. Daniel continued his daily work but stayed close to home. He showed Nailin how to prepare food and offered help without control. He never acted like he owned the situation. Instead, he treated her like someone who deserved respect. Members of the Apache community began to hear about Nailin's return. An elder woman came by one afternoon. She spoke with Nailin privately, holding her hands and listening. The visit ended with quiet understanding. The elder nodded at Daniel before leaving, a silent sign of respect. Still, uncertainty remained. Daniel knew help would eventually involve official decisions. He did not hide this from Nailin. He told her that honesty would protect her better than fear. That trust between them grew stronger. At night, Daniel would sit at the table thinking. He had never planned for his life to change like this. Yet he felt strangely at peace. He was not rescuing anyone. He was simply opening his door and choosing kindness. One evening, as the sun set, Nailin stood at the window holding her baby. She said softly that she never expected to come back and be welcomed. She thought she would be turned away. Daniel replied simply that sometimes people need help, and sometimes helping changes both lives. The baby slept peacefully between them, unaware of the fragile path being built around it. Part 2 ended not with answers, but with trust slowly forming, like a bridge made from patience and understanding. The days after Nailin returned were filled with quiet tension. Nothing bad happened, but nothing felt settled either. Daniel and Nailin both knew that what they were doing could not stay hidden forever. A baby had appeared suddenly, and people in a small town always notice things like that. Still, they moved forward one day at a time. Every morning, Daniel left early for work, but he did not go far. He repaired tools and machines for nearby farms and returned home often to check on Nailin and the baby. Nailin spent most of her time inside, keeping the baby close. She cleaned, cooked simple meals, and tried to make herself useful, though Daniel never asked her to do anything. He wanted her to feel safe, not obligated. Slowly, Nailin began to relax. She smiled more when she spoke to the baby. Her shoulders were not always tense anymore. Sometimes she would sit outside in the early morning, letting the sun warm her face while the baby slept in her arms. Those quiet moments gave her strength, but fear had not left her heart. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the local office. Daniel opened it carefully. It was polite but serious. They wanted to talk about the baby, about records, about next steps. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This was the moment he had known would come. He did not hide the letter from Naylin. That evening, he showed it to her and explained everything slowly. Naylin listened in silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She had already cried enough in her life. She asked one question very quietly. She asked if they would take her baby away. Daniel answered honestly. He said he did not know for sure, but he believed that truth and cooperation were the best path. He told her he would not let her face anything alone. That promise meant more to her than he realized. The next day, they went together to the local office. Daniel drove and Naylin sat beside him, holding the baby close. The road felt longer than usual. Neither of them spoke much. Words felt too heavy. Inside the office, they were greeted by calm voices and careful questions. No one raised their tone. No one accused. They asked about the night the baby was left, about Naylin's situation, about Daniel's role. Naylin spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. She told her story again, this time to people who wrote everything down. Daniel noticed how strong she was, even though fear lived behind her eyes. He admired that strength. After a long discussion, they were told that things would take time. The baby would stay with Naylin for now, under observation. Support services would be involved. Nothing would happen suddenly. It was not a perfect answer, but it was not a bad one either. When they walked out of the building, Naylin took a deep breath, as if she had been holding it for days. Daniel saw tears finally fall, but they were quiet tears, mixed with relief. Back at the house, life continued, but it felt different. The reality of the situation had settled in. Daniel realized he was no longer just a witness to someone else's struggle. He was part of it. Over the next weeks, people came and went. A nurse visited to check on the baby. A counselor spoke with Naylin. Members of her community visited more often now, bringing food and advice. Some were supportive, others were cautious. Everyone had opinions. Daniel stayed steady through it all. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words were clear. He told people that Naylin was a good mother. He told them the baby was loved. That was all that mattered to him. One evening, after a long day, Naylin finally opened up more than she ever had before. She told Daniel about her childhood, about how she was raised to be strong and respectful. She spoke about dreams she once had of teaching her child the old stories and songs. When her voice shook, Daniel listened without interrupting. She admitted that leaving the baby at his door had nearly broken her. Every step away from the house felt like tearing herself apart. She said she had turned back twice before forcing herself to walk on. Daniel felt a deep ache hearing this. He realized how close he had come to missing her forever. Daniel shared something too. He spoke about his wife, about the quiet life he had built after loss. He admitted that when he found the baby, the silence in his house finally broke. Not in a painful way, but in a way that felt alive. That conversation changed something between them. They were no longer just two people brought together by chance. They were two people choosing to stand together. Still, not everyone approved. One day, Daniel heard harsh words spoken outside the local store. Some people questioned why he was involved at all. Others made unfair judgments about Naylin without knowing her story. Daniel felt anger rise, but he controlled it. He knew that anger would not protect anyone. Instead, he returned home and told Naylin what had happened. He did not hide the truth, but he did not add fear either. Naylin listened quietly. She said she was used to being judged. What scared her more was losing hope. Daniel surprised himself by making a decision that night. He told Nayland that no matter what others said, he would stand with her openly. He would not hide their situation or pretend it was temporary. He believed in her as a mother and as a person. That choice brought new challenges. Attention increased. Questions grew louder. But something else grew too: respect. Some people began to see Daniel's actions not as interference, but as responsibility. The baby continued to grow, healthy and calm. Each small smile felt like a reward for the difficult path they were walking. Nayland often watched the baby sleep, her expression a mix of joy and fear, as if she was afraid happiness might disappear. One night, a storm passed through the desert. Rain hit the roof, loud and sudden. The baby cried, startled by the noise. Nayland held the child close, whispering softly. Daniel stood nearby, watching. In that moment, he understood something clearly. This was no longer about a baby left at a door. It was about building safety where there had once been fear. It was about choosing care when walking away would be easier. As the storm faded and silence returned, Daniel felt certain that whatever came next would test them even more. But he also knew they were no longer facing it alone. Part 3 ended with uncertainty still in the air, but also with something stronger than fear: commitment. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest Daniel and Nayland had ever lived through. What began as quiet support slowly turned into a test of patience, trust, and strength. Every day brought something new: another visit, another question, another moment that could change everything. Nayland tried her best to stay calm, but worry lived inside her. Even when she smiled at her baby, her eyes often showed fear. She was afraid that one wrong word or one small mistake could take everything away. Daniel noticed this and tried to make life feel normal. He kept his routine, woke up early, cooked simple meals, and treated Nayland like she belonged there, not like a guest waiting to be sent away. Support services continued their visits. They watched how Nayland cared for the baby, how she fed, cleaned, and comforted the child. They noticed how quickly the baby relaxed in her arms. Nothing about her actions showed neglect. Still, procedures had to be followed, and that made everything feel slow and heavy. One afternoon, Daniel was asked to attend a meeting alone. He did not like leaving Nayland behind, but he knew this conversation was important. He sat across from officials who asked him direct questions. Why was he involved? What did he plan to do if things became complicated? Did he understand the responsibility? Daniel answered honestly. He said he had not planned any of this, but he believed in doing what was right. He said he could not turn his back on a mother who only wanted safety for her child. His voice was steady, but his hands were tight in his lap. When he returned home, Nayland looked at him with worried eyes. He told her everything, choosing his words carefully. He did not hide the seriousness of the situation, but he also told her something important. He said people were starting to see the truth. That night, Nayland shared something she had been holding inside. She said that before she left her baby at the door, she had been warned by others not to trust anyone outside her world. Fear had shaped her choices for a long time. But Daniel's actions had slowly changed that fear into something else: hope. As time passed, members of the Apache community became more involved. Elders came to speak with officials, explaining cultural traditions and family bonds. They spoke about responsibility, about how a mother's care could not be measured only by rules on paper. Their voices carried weight. Daniel watched these moments quietly. He understood that he was not meant to lead these conversations. His role was to support, not to control. That respect earned him trust he never expected, but not all challenges came from outside. One evening, Nayland admitted she felt torn. She wanted to stand strong, but part of her feared she was bringing trouble into Daniel's life. She worried that people would judge him forever, that his peaceful life would be ruined because of her. The thought made her feel small. Daniel surprised her again. He told her that his life had already been quiet for too long. He said that caring for someone did not feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. Those words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. The baby grew stronger each day. Small changes, longer sleep, brighter eyes, gentle sounds, filled the house with life. Daniel found himself smiling more. The house no longer felt empty. It felt alive. Still, one major decision remained. A final review meeting was scheduled. This meeting would decide what kind of future Nailin and her baby could have. Daniel knew the outcome would affect all of them. The night before, no one slept much. Nailin held her baby and whispered promises she was afraid she might not be able to keep. The next morning they went together. The room was quiet and serious. Officials listened carefully. Reports were read. Observations were shared. Elders spoke again, calmly but firmly. They explained that protecting a child also meant protecting the bond between mother and child. When Daniel was asked to speak, he did not prepare a long speech. He simply said what he felt. He said that sometimes life puts people in impossible situations, and the measure of a person is not the mistake they make in fear, but what they do next. He said Nailin had come back. She had faced judgment. She had fought for her child. That mattered. The room fell silent after he spoke. When the decision was finally shared, it did not solve everything, but it changed the path forward. Nailin would not be separated from her baby. Support would continue, and adjustments would be made, but the family would stay together. Nailin broke down in tears, holding her baby close. This time her tears were not from fear, they were from release. Daniel felt his own eyes fill, though he said nothing. Outside, the sun was bright. The world looked the same, but everything felt different. Life did not suddenly become easy. There were still challenges ahead. Nailin needed stability. Daniel needed to adjust to a future he had never planned. But the biggest fear, the fear of being torn apart, had lifted. That evening, they returned home quietly. No celebration, no big words, just calm. Nailin placed her baby in the crib and sat beside it, watching. Daniel stood in the doorway, giving her space. She looked up at him and said something simple. She said thank you, not just for the help, but for believing. Daniel nodded. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had opened a door and chosen not to close it again. As night fell, the desert grew quiet once more. But this time, the silence felt warm, not empty. It held the sound of gentle breathing, of lives connected by choice, not chance. Part 4 closed with something rare and powerful, not a perfect ending, but a future built on trust, courage, and compassion. Life did not suddenly turn perfect after the decision, but something important had changed. Fear no longer ruled every moment. The house felt calmer, warmer, and more settled. Nailin woke up each morning with her baby beside her, and for the first time in many months, she did not feel like she had to run. Daniel returned to his routines, but they were no longer lonely. The sound of a baby breathing softly at night, the quiet movements of Nailin in the kitchen, and the small moments they shared made the house feel full. He noticed how even simple things felt different now. Drinking morning coffee while sunlight filled the room no longer felt empty. It felt shared. Nailin slowly began rebuilding her confidence. She took care of her baby with steady hands and growing calm. She followed the guidance given to her and never missed an appointment. Each visit showed the same truth again and again. The baby was healthy, loved, and safe. That knowledge strengthened her from the inside. Members of her community continued to visit. Some brought food, others brought advice, and some simply came to sit quietly and show support. Over time, the whispers in town began to fade. People saw consistency. They saw responsibility. Judgment softened. Daniel never tried to take control of Nailin's life. He respected her space, her culture, and her choices. That respect created trust. Nailin felt strong enough to speak openly now. She talked about the future, something she had not allowed herself to imagine before. She wanted stability. She wanted to work again, to stand on her own feet. Daniel helped her look for opportunities nearby. It was not easy, but small chances appeared. A local craft center welcomed her skills. Her hands remembered traditions passed down through generations. Slowly, she began earning again, not just money but pride. The baby continued to grow, reaching small milestones that filled the house with quiet joy. A first laugh, a curious look, tiny hands reaching for familiar faces. Daniel found himself deeply moved by these moments. He never tried to replace anyone. He simply became someone the baby trusted. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sky change colors, Nailin spoke about the night she left her baby at the door. She said the memory still hurt, but it no longer defined her. She said that coming back was the bravest thing she had ever done. Daniel agreed. Walking back into fear took more courage than walking away. Daniel shared that finding the baby had changed him too. He had lived many years protecting himself from loss by keeping life small. Opening his door that night had opened his heart again. He realized that caring deeply always carried risk, but it also carried meaning. As months passed, the support services slowly stepped back, not because they stopped caring, but because they saw strength and stability. Nailin stood on her own now, supported but not controlled. The baby remained with her right where they both belonged. One afternoon, a simple moment made everything clear. Nailin returned from work, tired but smiling. She picked up her baby, who reached out happily. Daniel watched from the doorway. There was no fear in that moment, only safety. Later that night, Nailin thanked Daniel again. She said that opening his door had saved her child, but opening his heart had saved her. Daniel shook his head gently. He said she had saved herself by coming back. They both knew their lives would always be connected, not through obligation but through choice. The story that began with desperation ended with something quieter but stronger: compassion, trust. A future shaped not by fear, but by courage. And in a small house at the edge of the desert, two lives once broken found a way forward together.